All right. Hey there, and welcome to this episode where we're going to continue and really tie up our series on scrupulosity. So, to this point, we've talked about the various kind of ways scrupulosity manifests. In the last episode, I was talking about really this idea of really owning the idea that you're the source of fear and not God. And that shift is massive when it comes to scrupulosity because then you start working at fear in the correct place. So with that, let's talk about how do you actually break out of the loop of scrupulosity? Well, the loop of scrupulosity is no different than any other fear, you know. Um, what you have to do is first assess what am I doing that's perpetuating this, right? What's perpetuating this fear? So if we take a alternative fear like contamination, and if you're constantly wearing gloves so you don't touch anything that's contaminated, constantly washing, avoiding doorknobs, using Perel all the time. Those are all the things you're doing that are perpetuating the idea that that doorknob is dangerous. So you can sit and say everything you want to in the sense of, oh, I believe I'm safe. I don't actually believe that that doorknob can hurt me. But if you're behaving in a way that's reinforcing, it's like you do believe it and you're going to continue to believe it. Right? So it doesn't really matter what you intellectually believe or even say that you believe. It's like watch your behavior, right? That tells you, right? And what scrupulosity is about moving from a place of living in fear to a place of trust. That's what every journey of overcoming any specific fear is really about. It's to say, I'm going to stop living in fear of this. Like other people in the world don't do this, right? So and they seem to be okay, right? Why should I do this? And this is really when you can identify if something is scrupulosity is like, does everyone do this? Does everyone need to do this, or do I have special rules for myself? Does everyone need to go to confession every day? Does everyone need to say this specific thing to neutralize this thought, right? Does everyone avoid church or go to church X amount of times? And it's like, if not, then clearly the conclusion you have to draw is like, I'm I'm the one that's doing things differently. I'm the one that's created these special rules. And if you deny that fact and project it onto God, then you're going to keep doing what you're doing. Because you're going to say, well, no, this is just part of my faith, right? It's part of what I believe. And denial is a massive thing that keeps people stuck when they want to tell me or tell anyone else or tell themselves that what they're doing is not about fear. It's about the topic. Because if you deny that, then you're never going to address the fear. So, how you break out of the wheel, and if you haven't checked out my book or learned about the AAA response, I'll have some links down in the notes. You can head over to restoredminds.com. It's also available on Amazon. But you have to really understand the wheel of fear. You have to understand the four components and you have to break the behavioral component. And then more importantly, you have to be able to feel through the emotional component to where you really release that emotion. And as you release fear, what happens is that you naturally move into higher states where you perceive things totally differently. Because when you're in a state of peace and you're in a state of trust, it's like it's obvious to you that we have this loving creator, right? It's obvious. When you're in this really, really elevated states where you just feel like love, and love is not like not even a romantic love, just like a state where you're just like, you just feel love. You see it everywhere. right? Because you ultimately realize like it's just everywhere, right? Um, it's hard to explain sometimes verbally. In fact, I don't really know that you can explain it verbally. But what overcoming scrupulosity is about saying like, I trust God. I trust God for every aspect of my life. Whatever you're afraid of, like if you really trusted God with that, what would you do? And for the most part, the answer is nothing. You wouldn't constantly pray about the same thing again and again and again and again. You would trust that it was handled. It's done. You know, it's already taken care of. And a big part of overcoming scrupulosity is learning to move, what Richard Dotz is one of my favorite authors. He talks about moving from head space to heart space. And this idea of you really got to not listen to what your mind is saying. You got to disengage from that and really being able to live from your heart. Because your heart is where your intuition lies, right? In the Bible, it's the heart is referenced way more than the mind. God cares more about the heart of the individual, right? This is why like doing these religious activities from a place of fear, I don't think they're meaningless, but like again, you can't fool God from the idea of the place that you're operating. You know, it's like God knows the true spirit in which you're doing something. And when I became a father, when my daughter was born, and I really began to understand this idea of a loving creator, because I just think about in my own flawed humanness how I perceive my daughter and the relationship that I desire with my daughter. And we're expecting our second in a few weeks now, and the relationship that I want to have with him, right? And the idea of like what it means for them to live in a trust of me, and for them to be in a state of trust, and how they operate in a state of trust. That's what the whole idea of attachment theory is. What's your general attachment to the world? Do you live in a secure attachment or an insecure attachment? Do I live from trust or do I live from fear? And that's really, what I started to learn about my own relationship with God, right? Like, do I want my daughter to fear me and try to do everything so I don't do something harmful to her? It's like, no, my gosh, this is terrible to even say that out loud. I want her to live in a knowingness that like I'm always here, always ready, always willing to provide, you know? And that internal state in her is the way that happens is by me coming through again and again and again. And that takes trust, right? And the same way with God, like when you really begin to trust and not say, okay, I trust God and I'm going to go do everything anyway. That's not trust. In order to really develop a trusting relationship with God, you got to let God come through. Meaning you have to stop doing all the things that you're doing, right? And really trust that. That's my honest opinion on this, is what it means to trust is you letting go and saying, I don't know best. And I trust the divine intelligence to provide, to really come through. And I mean, like in your life, that's what I believe that means. And that shift is a very deep internal shift that you make. And it's a conscious choice of saying, I'm not going to operate from fear anymore. I know fear is destructive. I knew when I was operating in fear it was destructive. I could tell by the fruit of it. You can tell by the fruit of it in your own life. As you do all your compulsions, does your life expand? Are you happier? Are you more joyful? Are you having better relationships? Are you doing better at work? Are you seeing the fruit in your life? For most of you, you're honest, you're going to say no. It's destructive. Just because you're doing something that is a religious activity doesn't mean it can't be done in a destructive way. And this is really when it comes down to the idea of how I evaluate something. I don't evaluate something based on the surface. I look at the underlying energy of it. Just because someone comes up to me and says, "Oh, well, I'm a Christian," it's like, okay, well, that's great. That doesn't instantly mean that I trust everything you're saying, right? It's like we got to be careful not to operate with assumptions, because I'm very I pay attention to the underlying energy of the person, you know? And the same thing, like, oh, this is a Christian organization, this is a church, this is people think that just because you throw that particular label on something, that means that there can't be, again, bad intentions underneath it, because there sure can. And this is why being able to, so just because someone is confessing all the time, or praying all the time, or reading the Bible all the time, doesn't mean they're doing something that's helping them. Because if they're doing it from the energy of fear, that's constantly reinforcing something, slowly like destroying things, it's like that can be destructive. It's not that the Bible is destructive, it's that the energy that someone's doing something from is what ultimately becomes destructive. So this is why, you being able to ascertain or figure out what energy you're operating from is like one of the most critical things you'll ever learn to do in life, and really be authentic and honest with yourself. And then really begin to learn how to move from fear to trust. And what would it mean for you to live in a place where you literally trusted God? Like, what would that look like? What does it look like for people that do? You know? And really begin to shift into that. Because that's what overcoming scrupulosity is about. Overcome scrupulosity, it's like, yeah, okay, I can tell you ERP. Yeah, we do ERP, right? And taking back control, I teach AAA response. There's all these techniques and tools and all that stuff. Great. What the fundamental idea is if I lived from a place of trust, what would I do? How would that look? And if I lived from a place of fear, what would I do? And it's walking the gap from living in fear to living in trust. If you really trusted in a divine intelligence that was unfailing, unconditional love, what would you need to do to get that love? And the answer is nothing. The answer is nothing. It's already there. You already have it. So when that fear comes up, it's not an indication that, oh, I'm afraid, so God must not really love me. That's my fear. I need to go work through that fear and get myself to the internal state of trust. There's nothing you need to do to change God, right? That's not, the work is not about convincing something external. It's the internal work of moving to the state of trust. So that's what, those are my thoughts, on scrupulosity. Again, if you're looking for help with it, great place to start would be my book, From Stuck to Unstuck. Because again, we're solving this and looking at this from an OCD and anxiety and fear perspective, not from a God perspective, right? The fear is latched on to the topic of God. And also, you can apply for TBC, which is my 12-week program. Lots of stuff in there, jam-packed as well, full of, really teaching you how to make this journey from fear to trust. And with that, I really hope you enjoyed this. I enjoyed creating it. Hope it was helpful. And so if you did, please help us out by liking, subscribing, leaving a comment and review on iTunes and Spotify, as it really helps the show. And with that, I wish you guys a great day, great week, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Hey there. So if you enjoyed that video, we've linked up a few more videos that we think you'd find helpful as well. And if you have found this helpful, we'd really appreciate your support by liking and subscribing. And if you're looking for help and guidance, please check out restoredminds.com as we have several options for you to get started. See you guys soon.